Every January, the most powerful people on earth meet behind closed doors in Davos. Presidents, billionaires, tech CEOs, military leaders, all in one room, deciding what comes next. But this year felt different. The tone shifted, the priorities changed, and some of the things discussed were unsettling. The optimism is gone, the confidence is fading, and instead, the conversations are now about fragmentation, instability, security, and disruption. So I asked the AI a very direct question. What exactly came out of Davos 2026? And what does it most likely mean for global stability, our economies, our freedoms, and everyday life over the next 1 to 3 years? And the answer was not really comforting. Before we get into it, this is a brand new channel, and if you enjoy deep dives like this that break down complex global events in simple everyday language, it would mean a lot if you subscribe. It genuinely helps more than you might think. Alright, let's get into it. Here is the exact prompt I used. Write a single, clear response in normal everyday language without bullet points or lists. First, research the key speeches, policy discussions, and themes coming out of the 2026 World Economic Forum in Davos. Identify the main priorities, risks, and power shifts being discussed by political, financial, and technology leaders. Then explain what these developments most likely mean for global stability, economic security, personal freedom, and everyday life over the next 1 to 3 years. Be neutral, factual, and analytical. Avoid emotional language, politics, or conspiracy framing. Clearly separate what is known from what is uncertain. Finish with a clear overall judgment about whether the direction suggested by Davos 2026 is reassuring, concerning, or mixed, and why. And here is the response we got from ChatGPT. From the official programming and transcripts, the clearest known signal from Davos 2026 is that leaders see the world entering a more fragmented, higher friction era, and they're trying to rebuild coordination without assuming the old rules or globalization will come back on their own. The meeting's framing, a spirit of dialogue, and the forum's own recap put the center of gravity on managing geoeconomic fragmentation, rebuilding trust, and keeping trade, capital, and technology flows workable under sharper security pressures. This opening is already tells us a lot. For decades, globalization worked on the assumption that cooperation, trade, and interconnected markets would keep expanding. That era is now officially considered over. Leaders aren't talking about restoring the old system. They're talking about managing fragmentation. In simple terms, they believe the world is splitting into competing blocks where security concerns now override pure economic efficiency. That's a massive shift in mindset. It means future decisions will prioritize control, resilience, and protection, not cheap prices and maximum growth. Next, the AI break down the four major themes that dominated Davos. In the policy and CEO level discussions, four themes dominated. First, economic security is being treated as a top-tier priority, supply chain resilience, industrial policy de-risking rather than full decoupling, and the reality that sanctions, export controls, and strategic subsidies are now structural features of the system, not temporary crisis tools. This tells us that governments now assume economic conflict is permanent. Sanctions, tariffs, trade restrictions, and industrial subsidies are no longer emergency measures. They are becoming the normal operating system. This almost guarantees higher costs, more inefficiencies, and frequent disruptions for consumers and businesses alike. And then comes the second theme. Second, AI moved from future opportunity to immediate labor market and legitimacy problem. IMF head Kristalina Georgieva publicly warned about large employment shock, especially to younger and entry-level workers, and several leaders stressed that if gains concentrate in a small group, the social license for AI will erode fast. This is one of the most important warnings of the entire forum. AI is no longer seen as a distant future technology. Leaders now openly expect major job displacement, especially for young workers and entry-level positions. And here's the key phrase: social license. That means public acceptance. If AI benefits only a tiny elite, while large parts of society lose job security, backlash becomes inevitable. That's when regulations, protests, and political instability enter the picture. Now, the third theme, security and power shifts, were discussed less as a single Ukraine issue and more as a broader test of Europe's cohesion, deterrence credibility, and capacity to act at speed. Zelensky's Davos message explicitly pressed the point that Europe's internal fragmentation is now a strategic vulnerability, not just a political nuisance. This is a blunt warning. Europe's biggest weakness is not military strength or economic size, it's internal division, and leaders increasingly see the fragmentation as a security threat in itself, meaning future policy may focus less on democratic consensus and more on speed, centralization, and unity, even if that comes at a political cost. And the fourth theme, technology and energy transitions, were framed as competitive areas. AI, compute, chips, robotics, clean tech, and permitting speed, with leaders like Macron pushing a blend of simplification and investment to keep Europe competitive, and tech figures using Davos as a stage to argue that robotics automation could drive a productivity boom, while implicitly underscoring how fast the underlying capability curve is moving. This confirms that technology is now treated as a geopolitical weapon. Who controls chips, compute power, robotics, energy infrastructure, and AI capability will shape global power. This competition will define the next decade. Now, the AI translates this into everyday consequences. What this most likely means for the next 1 to 3 years in everyday terms is not one big break, but a steady accumulation of constraints and adaptation. This part is crucial. There won't be one dramatic collapse. Instead, it's slow pressure. Higher prices here, shortages there, more regulation, more friction. Global stability is likely to be shakier because the baseline level of trust and policy coordination is lower, meaning crises spread faster and resolve slower. Economic security will be pursued more at the national and bloc level, which usually means more targeted subsidies, more screening of investment and data flows, and occasional price availability bumps in certain goods even if headline inflation stays contained, which usually means subsidies, controls, trade restrictions, and occasional supply shocks. Personal freedom is unlikely to be directly redefined in one stroke, but it will be shaped by the practical policy response to AI and security. More identify, compliance, content and safety regimes around digital platforms and critical infrastructure, and more workspace monitoring as firms chase productivity and risk control. This is subtle but extremely important. More digital identity systems, more compliance rules, more monitoring, more regulation of online behavior. Not dramatic authoritarianism, but slow, steady tightening. And finally, the most tangible day-to-day change is likely to be labor market churn, where many roles get partially automated, entry-level pathways narrow in some sectors, and mid-career workers face higher pressure to reskill or move laterally as organizations redesign jobs around AI tools. In simple terms, job instability. More automation, fewer entry-level roles, more pressure to constantly reskill. Now, the AI explains the main uncertainties. The main uncertainties are the speed and distribution of AI-driven productivity, and whether geopolitics forces sharper ruptures than the de-risking language implies. This means everything depends on how fast AI replaces jobs and whether global conflicts escalate into full economic warfare. If either accelerates, the system becomes much more unstable. And here's the final conclusion. Overall, the direction suggested by Davos 2026 is mixed, reassuring in the sense that many of the most powerful institutions are openly prioritizing resilience, dialogue, and practical coordination in a tougher world, but concerning because the underlying diagnosis is that fragmentation, security competition, and disruptive AI are now the default conditions, and those forces tend to narrow policy choices and raise social stress before they raise living standards. This might be the most honest assessment possible. Leaders are trying to stabilize a system they believe is fundamentally breaking apart. That doesn't mean collapse, but it does mean turbulence. So if there's one clear takeaway of Davos 2026, it's this. The people running the global system now openly believe we're entering a more unstable, fragmented, and competitive era. They're not preparing for growth and cooperation. They're preparing for resilience, security, and disruption. That doesn't mean disaster, but it does mean the world of the next few years will likely feel more tense, more expensive, more regulated, and more uncertain than the one we just left behind. Now I would love to hear your thoughts. Does this sound like a responsible planning or a system quietly bracing for breakdown? And that's what this channel is about. Asking AI difficult questions and breaking them down in simple terms. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, consider subscribing. It helps the channel grow and allows me to keep making videos like this. Appreciate you stayed till the end. Until next time.